There's something about old family homes, the kind that sit on quiet streets, passed down through generations. They hold memories, whispers, and sometimes things far more sinister. This isn't a legend, not something I read online. This story was told to me by my father, and what happened to him when he was just 18 has haunted our family ever since. It started with a summer trip to a quiet southern town, a night spent inside an abandoned house, a dream that felt far too real, and a mark that never faded. This is the true, terrifying story of the handprint in the dark. My dad was 18 when it happened. It was the summer of '79, and he'd gone to visit his mom's side of the family in Savannah, Georgia, a historic southern town known for its charm and its ghosts. The family lived along a street lined with old colonial homes, porches wrapped in ivy, floors that creaked with every step, and stories whispered behind closed doors. A few cousins were visiting too, along with a 25-year-old relative they called Uncle Richard. But one house on the street, just 2 doors down, was different. It was abandoned. No lights, no furniture, just an empty, crumbling shell that local guys sometimes used for outdoor weight training. They'd rigged up some rusted gym equipment in the backyard. One guy, Jake, was lifting alone one afternoon. After finishing a heavy set, he stood to stretch and felt a firm pat on his back. A voice said, "Well done," only. He was completely alone. He never went back. Naturally, my dad and Uncle Richard were intrigued. They were young, bold, a little reckless. So they made a plan. They'd sneak in just before midnight and spend the night. Older relatives warned them. Their grandfather called them fools. "You don't mess with things you don't understand," he said. But they didn't listen. They brought a couple of folding cots and climbed to the rooftop patio, planning to sleep under the stars. The house was sealed shut, so they asked the family's handyman, Carlos, to bolt the front door behind them. He just laughed. "Keep the key close," he said. "You'll be begging to get out before sunup." Before they left, one uncle gave them a challenge. Set a checkerboard on the living room table. Leave it untouched. See if it's the same come morning. So they did. Then they climbed up, lit a single camping lantern, and passed the time playing cards. Everything felt quiet, peaceful, until midnight. That's when they heard it squeak, thump, the sound of the old spigot in the backyard. Then running water. They were 3 stories up, but it sounded like it was right behind them. No one said a word. They just listened, frozen. Eventually, they tried to sleep. My dad fell asleep near the edge of the roof, but sometime after 3 a.m., one of his cousins shook him awake, panicked. He looked over and saw Uncle Richard, shirtless, on his back, his own hands wrapped around his throat like he was being strangled by some invisible force. They rushed to him, shook him, yelled. Nearly a full minute passed before his eyes shot open and he gasped for air. Then he said something none of them would forget. "We need to get out now." One cousin hesitated. "It's just after 3, almost sunrise." I said, "Now. I'll jump off this roof if I have to." No one argued after that. They rushed downstairs, but the front door was still locked. They shouted for Carlos. Instead, their grandfather appeared from the porch, calm, almost like he'd been expecting it. He told Carlos to unlock the door, but warned them, "Walk carefully and don't look too long into the shadows." They made their way down, 3 floors in near darkness, just the flicker of that lantern lighting the way. No one wanted to go first, and no one could shake the image of Richard gasping for air, hands clamped around his own throat. As they passed the living room, the checkerboard, it had been perfectly played. Every piece moved, as if something or someone had finished the game. Carlos was waiting at the door, smiling. "So, y'all done being brave?" he said. Nobody answered. Outside, under the safety of the street lamp, they begged Uncle Richard to explain. He hesitated, then finally spoke. "I was dreaming," he said. "I walked out to the backyard, started to pee. Then he appeared. An old man, long beard, eyes like fire. He grabbed my throat and screamed, 'How dare you defile this sacred place?' He lifted me up with one hand. I couldn't breathe. I was choking. And then I woke up." Richard slowly pulled his hands from his throat, and even in the dim light, they saw it. A handprint, deep red-blue, fingers, palm, clear as day. Richard didn't speak for the rest of the day. He stayed inside, wouldn't eat, barely moved. That night, their grandfather lit sage in the backyard and read from an old Bible. No one dared mention the house again, but it didn't stop there. A few days later, just before they left town, Richard began coughing violently. At first, they thought it was the heat until he coughed into his hand and saw blood. They rushed him to a doctor, but the scans showed nothing conclusive, just bruising and swelling in his throat. The house, it sat empty for 2 more years, until one night it caught fire. Some blamed bad wiring. Others said the spirit had finally taken what was his. Uncle Richard recovered, but he was never the same. He stopped talking about that night, and no matter how hot the summers got, he always wore a scarf. Years later, my dad asked him one last time, what really happened in that house? Richard just said, some places aren't haunted by ghosts. They're haunted by memory, and some memories leave marks you can never wash away. So if you ever find yourself near an old family home, quiet, abandoned, waiting, think twice before going inside, because some doors, once opened, never truly close. This was the true story of the handprint in the dark. Some stories fade with time, but the truly terrifying ones stick with you, like a handprint in the dark. If this tale haunted your thoughts, subscribe to Dark Demon Tales, where the shadows speak and the silence screams.